Media. Mon Mothma wants nothing to do with this guy. Like, she didn't even want to meet him in the first place, let alone have her daughter marry his son. So she turns him down outright. She's like, you need to get out of here. What would make you even think that I support those old traditions in the first place?
You're listening to
Path of the Jedi
with your host, Ronnie Cruz.
All right, welcome to Path of the Jedi, the podcast where Star Wars meets personal development. My name is Ronnie Cruz, your host for this suffocating adventure. That's right, suffocating. Okay, so I had originally thought to use the word stifling, but stifling just wasn't cutting it. It wasn't a severe enough description of how I was feeling watching Andor Episode 10, which is what we're going to talk about today. Andor Episode 10, One Way Out. That's the title of the episode. I wanted to use the word suffocating because, okay, so in the past couple of weeks, we talked about the powder keg and how, things are about to blow, right? This pressure cooker situation and all the storylines is just building and building, and eventually something's going to happen. Now, within that context, for today's episode, or for Andor Episode 10, our characters in this pressure cooker situation seem to be more and more getting backed into a corner, right? The walls are really, really starting to close in, and as a result, they have fewer and fewer options. They have fewer and fewer choices that they can make, right? To the point where some of them don't even have any more choice, right? And so that to me feels very, very suffocating, to not be able to make a choice, to be forced into certain decisions is just maddening an experience. And to watch all our heroes go through this, it's like, man, there's got to be something else. There's got to be something else. But we'll see, and we'll discuss this more in depth for today's episode. But yeah, very, very suffocating experience, a very maddening, frustrating experience. Again, it's one of those things like that whole through line in the last like 3-4 episodes that we've had here on Path of the Jedi has talked about the high level of frustration, the high level of pressure, the fewer and fewer options. It's just all this tension is building, right? This tension and intensity is building. So it's going to come to a head, and some of it has already come to a head with Episode 10. So we're going to definitely dive into that. Now, as an aside, actually, as a mini lesson for today, choices and decisions, right? We have some of our characters, some of our heroes being forced into decisions that they wouldn't necessarily make given different circumstances. So my advice would be decisive. Make a decision before you don't have a decision to make, right? Before there are no more options. Sometimes we can have the tendency to just kind of dawdle around, which is fine, right? Like, especially on days where you have nothing to do, it's a leisure day, it's downtime day. But, with important decisions, make sure you be decisive. Make sure you attack it and don't just not think about it, because a decision is going to be made for you one way or another. And it'd be better for you to be decisive, decide up front, again, before you don't have a decision to make. Okay, we do have a lot to talk about today, so let's listen to this quick message and then we'll dive right in. I was at an event recently and I heard one of the most incredible stories that I'd heard in a very, very long time. A gentleman got up on stage and he shared how from January 2022 to October of 2022, he had lost over 160 pounds, 160, using the Yoli transformation kit. This story was so inspirational. Of course, it's ongoing, right? He's still on a road to better health and he's losing more weight. I wanted to share this story with you because for me, the way I see it, so many things had to line up for this kind of transformation to happen. Number one, somebody had to care enough about him, about his health, about his family, to reach out to him, to offer him this solution. Number two, he had to be ready to hear that message, right? He actually went on in his story to share that it took almost 6 months of that individual reaching out to him for him to finally say yes. So he had to be ready. He had to be a place in his heart and in his mind to accept that message and to accept the solution. And number three, of course, the system has to work, right? The system has to be effective and the products have to be good. So all these things had to align, and this transformation is a result of that, and it's gone on to inspire so many people to take control of their health, whether or not they have weight to lose, whether or not you have weight to lose. I think I find this story incredibly inspirational of what's possible. So I'm reaching out to you. I'm sharing this message because, number one, I care about you. And number two, in case you are in a place in your life that you want to make some changes in your health, you don't have to necessarily have to lose, 100 pounds. If you got to shed 5 to 10 pounds, or if you're already healthy, like me, I've been on the transformation kit actually for 10 years and I've been incredibly healthy. I feel like I'm getting younger and younger with each year. So wherever you are in your health, if there's some things that you want to change, if there's some adjustments that you want to make, I want to let you know that the Yoli Transformation Kit is a great all-natural solution where you can gain your health back. Right? So if you want to know more, I encourage you to go to pathofthejedi.com/resources and click on transformation to learn more about the Yoli Transformation Kit. Like I said, I've been on these products for more than 10 years, and over those 10 years, I've heard countless stories from individuals whose lives have been absolutely transformed by this amazing system, the Yoli Transformation Kit. Again, if you want to learn more, if you're ready to make a change in your health, go to pathofthejedi.com/resources and click on transformation. Okay, Andor episode 10, One Way Out. Another amazing title that just is so descriptive of so many things that's happening, so many dimensions, so many layers to this particular episode of Andor. Let's start with the motif of prison, right? I think all our characters, well, many of the characters that we see in this particular episode and throughout the show, but specifically this episode, are in some sort of prison, right? Whether it's a metaphorical prison or a literal prison like Cassian, right? And these are prisons of their own making. They're prisons of circumstance, prisons as a result of choices that they've made in the past. But whatever the situation might be for these individuals, they are all somehow seem to be trapped in these circumstances that as time goes on, again, they have fewer and fewer options to be able to get out of. Now, what's really awesome about this show is that, well, one of the many things that's awesome about this show is that it can express and communicate these motifs, especially in this episode. It communicates these motifs in so many different ways, right? It can express it in so many different ways. Let's just talk about the motif of prisons, for example. Obviously, it's expressed thematically with what the characters are going through, with what our heroes are experiencing. It's expressed literally with Cassian being locked up in an actual prison, but it's also expressed visually. And sometimes, those visual cues are harder to catch. And I want to point out an example that was shown to me by a colleague in the podcasting world, Star Wars podcasting world. The gals over at Most Things KENOBI. Go check them out. Go give them a listen. It's a great show. But they posted one day on Twitter a photo of Mon Mothma standing in her home. And it's really kind of shocking when you see it. But Mon Mothma is standing in her home, and she has these, her home has these very ornate kind of shaped geometric archways, right? And so when you juxtapose that particular picture of her standing in the archways to a bird's eye view of the prison where Cassian is locked up in, you see that they mirror each other. They're pretty much the same shape, and so it's a visual cue that Mon Mothma is in her own prison. It's not a literal prison, but she is very much trapped in her circumstances, right? Whether we're talking about her family circumstances, whether we're talking about her political career, whether we're talking about her involvement in the rebellion, or all three of those, because they're definitely all intertwined into one. She is in a prison as we see in this episode, she is the walls are getting closer and closer and tighter in. Amazing stuff, and I would encourage you to, once you finish watching the show, you get to the last episode, go back and rewatch it with this kind of critical eye and examine all the beautiful things that the creators have done to make this show so rich and so multidimensional. I think there's a good reason why this show is I think more beloved than any of the other shows so far. Not that I've not liked any of the other shows. I love everything Star Wars. But this show in particular, I feel really has elevated the game in a very, very big way. Now, since we're already talking about Mon Mothma, let's dig a little deeper into the many ways that she is in a prison. Being of Chandrilan heritage, the Chandrilan culture, what we know of it, what we've seen of it from the show is that it's a very high status, a very elite society, very elite culture, very wealthy culture. Also a culture rich in tradition, and one of those traditions happens to be betrothal. And Mon Mothma is, hasn't, been able to escape that tradition herself. Her marriage to her husband that we see in this show is a betrothed marriage, and so that already, in a sense, is being trapped, right? Like that's being in a situation that she didn't necessarily choose to be in. So there's that level, and of course, when we talk about her as a senator and the politics and how more and more she's feeling trapped by her inability to make effective change, and then on top of that, with the empire's regulations on finances becoming tighter and tighter and more strict, she is starting to really get backed into a corner. Again, the walls are closing in on her ability to hide the fact that she's been funding the rebellion or this growing rebellion, and so she's had to at least entertain dealing with less savory individuals to hide that fact, right? To hide the fact that she's been using her money to fund the rebellion, and that's when we're introduced to this character Davo Skulden, this freaking guy. Okay, so he is also of Chandrilan heritage, very wealthy as well. But wealthy, I think, from just being a thug, and well, not necessarily a thug, but I think just this high-level loan shark, right? And he actually alludes to the fact that he has had dealings with Mon Mothma's husband. So we'll see that later, a little bit later on in the next couple of episodes play out. But this Davo guy, he's very, very into his position and his status, but he's also willing to kind of work within those boundaries, right? And that's what, like, he has a couple of quotes that's really apropos to what we're talking about today. One of the quotes is, he says, "Boundaries can be liberating. The old ways have value." So he's very much a proponent of these kind of boundaries, of these traditions, of the way things are. Because he's been able to profit from it, right? He's been able to kind of manipulate his way around and game the system to his own benefit. So why wouldn't he, support the system? Why wouldn't he support these traditions? Why wouldn't he support these boundaries? For him, it's been liberating because, again, he's been able to really capitalize on it. So they're having this conversation. Davo pretty much says that, yeah, I can hide your money. It's not a big deal. It's pretty easy to do. As a matter of fact, I've gotten quite good at it, and I don't want any actual payment. What I would want is an introduction. I want my son to meet your daughter. Of course, not in so many words, but basically what he's saying is, in exchange for my services, I would like a union of our families. I would like a union between my son and your daughter. Mon Mothma wants nothing to do with this guy. Like, she didn't even want to meet him in the first place, let alone have her daughter marry his son. So she turns him down outright. She's like, "You need to get out of here. What would make you even think that I support those old traditions in the first place?" And this is where we get the second quote from Davo, another awesome quote. He says, "Our position sometimes makes decisions for us." Now, I absolutely love this quote. It's so good. It's so rich and layered. There's so much subtext to it. On the surface, Davo is talking about their role and their position in society, right? As prominent elite figures, especially as part of the Chandrilan society and culture, their position often is dictated, their decisions are often dictated by their position and their roles in that society. However, Davo is fully aware that Mon Mothma's back is against the wall, and she has very few, if any, options outside of what he's offering. And so that's what he's saying here. Is like, look, you're in a position where you cannot make any decision except this. So you know what? call me back when you've made that decision, and we'll make it happen. Like, and he's super confident in this because he knows the game, right? That's the thing about Davo. He's kind of a scoundrel, but he's hard not to like in this situation and in the scene, because you know that he's gotten so good at gaming the system and playing the game, where he can walk in and he knows that he is the only choice, and that Mon Mothma has no other choice but to acquiesce and give him what he wants in exchange for his services. You kind of wish that Mon Mothma was in that same position, right, where she was positioned where she could make these kinds of calls, and she had gamed the system well enough. However, I mean, she's had so many things going against her, right? At any rate, it's one of those things that, like, all of this kind of encapsulates the prison that Mon Mothma is in, right? The prison of position, the prison of circumstance, the prison of her own choices and her own making, right? Being involved with the rebellion. So yeah, Mon Mothma is an amazing example of this prison motif and how she's really more and more just kind of trapped by these circumstances. And of course, we have many more. Cassian obviously is the poster child for the prison motif, being in the actual prison. This episode was largely the prisoners breaking out, right? We find out that they are going to exterminate all the prisoners because of something that happened in another wing of the prison camp. And so, you know, it's that situation. Like, they have to make a decision to try to escape, or they're going to be killed, right? Those are the choices. Remember, you have to decide, be decisive, or else that decision is going to be made for you. And so they finally do. And Kino Loy is really instrumental in this situation. Again, he has the influence with the other inmates. And so he's finally able to, Cassian is finally able to win him over. And with his help, they all break out. Unfortunately, Kino is unable to fully escape because in order to get away from the facility, they have to swim, and Kino cannot. Unfortunately, Kino cannot swim. I might do an entire episode just on Kino, because his story arc, his character arc, through just like the 3 episodes that we see him in, was absolutely amazing, and it gives us a lot of lessons to talk about. So I might do an academy just on Kino Loy. But yeah, he gets stuck at prison. I think he's sort of resigned to the fact that he can't swim and he may not make it out of the facility. However, I think there is that level of kind of satisfaction that, number one, he did go for it, and in doing so helped everybody else escape. Again, we'll probably have to dive into or do a whole episode on just Kino. Another character who is in a prison in this episode is a character by the name of Lonnie. Now, Lonnie was pretty much under the radar for me. You know what I mean? Like, I never really noticed him that much. You know, he was definitely present in the show a lot, but very much in the background. So Lonnie is an ISB officer, a very high-ranking one at that. Like, I think he's somewhere around the rank and position of Deidre Miro. But we find out at the end of this episode that he's actually a spy for Luthen. And given his rank at the ISB, he's an important and key element for the rebellion. We also find out that he's actually married, and his wife recently just had a baby. This is their first child. So he has a young family. He's a high-ranking officer at the ISB, and he's a spy for Luthen. Given this circumstance, the escalating conflict between the Empire and the rebellion, and the pressures building in the ISB, and then of course given his rank and then being a spy, it's just the risk has gotten too high. It's gotten too dangerous for him, and so he's going to meet Luthen to tell Luthen that he wants out, right? He tells Luthen, "Look, I've done some great work over the years. You know, I've dedicated my life and years to this cause. I've sacrificed for so much for this cause, and I've given a lot of great information. But it's time. It's too dangerous. It's too risky. I want out." Luthen basically tells him, "No, I'm not letting you out." And we'll talk about Luthen in just a little bit. So we see that, like, what do you mean you want out? Luthen actually alludes to the fact that he knows Lonnie had a baby recently, and he knows where his wife is, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, he's telling Lonnie that, hey, I got my eye on you, and I know where you live. I know everything that's going on in your life. And that's the thing about Luthen, right? He knows everything about everyone that's working for and with him, but nobody knows anything about him. And so he uses uses this as leverage over Lonnie to manipulate and coerce him into staying at the ISB. He hasn't given Lonnie any choice, because otherwise, Lonnie's family would suffer the consequences. And that's kind of a really crappy thing to do, right? Like you put a guy in a position where he either suffers a consequence of the Empire or he suffers the consequence of Luthen. I mean, like, who's the bad guy in this situation? So Lonnie very much is in a prison. He has zero choice in this situation. Yes, he might have chosen initially to join the movement, to join the cause, but where he is now, he's become too valuable to Luthen, and so Luthen is taking that choice away from him. In a prison, again, it's one of those prisons. With Luthen now, okay, so let's talk about Luthen. We see this side of him. It's not a savory side. Again, who's the bad guy in the situation? If he's taking choice away from people, he's pretty much acting like the Empire, the very thing that he's supposedly fighting against. And so when we hear him give this speech, he gives a speech at the end, and it's because Lonnie was like, "Look, I sacrificed so much already, Luthen. What have you sacrificed?" And I guess that hurt Luthen's feelings. That triggered Luthen, and Luthen goes off on this tirade that you would think that it would be kind of this noble speech, but it was really just a self-serving speech, right? It was really just a patting himself on the back, and we see that Luthen's psychology and his mindset about the cause isn't so much that it's a cause; it's more that it's his cause, right? Like, he's really taking ownership of this mission, and I think because of that. He's willing to do whatever it takes to get that done, and he has identified the mission as part of him, right? So like he in his mind probably thinks that he's completely noble, and the sacrifices that he's made is, like, I've given up calm in my life, I've given up normal conversations, I've given up the ability to take credit and tell the stories of this great cause that we're fighting against, that we're fighting for. And really, like, that to me, it's like, cry me a river. I don't know. Maybe I should have more sympathy for Luthen, but like the way he talks about the cause, it seems very self-serving. And again, if he's willing to behave like the Empire in order to achieve his ends, then what really is the cause he's fighting for, right? You got to give the people the freedom to kind of bow out whenever they want to bow out. Otherwise, then it just becomes, the fight between two different tyrannical forces, right? All right, so yeah, I don't see Luthen necessarily as noble as he probably sees himself to be, and the prison, the quote unquote prison that he sees himself in, these sacrifices that he's made, he's given up his life, and so, like, this is the road, this is the course that his life is going to go. He communicates it in a way, like in his speech, he makes it sound like he doesn't have any more choice, but really he's still doing this because he chooses to still do this, right? Nobody's holding anything over his head like he's holding things over Lonnie's head, or probably multiple other people's heads that he's forcing to work for him, right? So it really ties up our conversation very well about prisons, right? And that are we in prisons? Are these characters in prisons of their choice, of their choosing, or are they in prisons where they have no choice, right? They're just a prison of circumstances. Now, when you look at Mon Mothma, when you look at Cassian, when you look at the inmates, when you look at Lonnie even, right? Yes, they might be in a very tight position where the circumstances have caused have pushed their backs against the walls, right? Like they've been kind of backed into corners because of the circumstances. However, it was their decisions in the first place that got them there, right? With Mon Mothma, she chose to get involved with Luthen and with the rebellion. Lonnie obviously made that same decision as well. Cassian is in the situation he's in because of the decisions he's made throughout the show, right? Every decision that he's made has led to his current circumstance. So yes, like the not having decisions or having few options where they are right now sucks. But the understanding is that, okay, yeah, you're kind of in that choice. You made that choice, so you kind of have to sleep in the bed you made, or whatever the saying is, right? You guys, I suck at sayings, but you know what I mean. Like you made the bed, now sleep in it. Now, how does all this pertain to life here on Earth, right? How does it pertain to our experiences? Well, I think we can all relate to feeling stuck about something, right? Feeling stuck with some aspect of life, being dissatisfied, being unhappy with some aspect of life, and then but feeling like we can't really do anything about it, right? Feeling like we don't have much choice. And I totally get it, right? With everything that's going on in the world externally around us, all these situations, circumstances that affect our day-to-day lives, it can feel like we have fewer and fewer options with the gas prices going up, the economy and inflation going up. Things are really tightening, and it's very similar to the situation in the show where the walls can feel like they're starting to close in any aspect of life. I'm not just talking about financially, right? We can be talking about career, relationships, family, health, whatever it might be. We can often, I think we can all relate to that feeling of just not having a choice, but feeling stuck with a less than ideal situation. I want you to know that very much like the characters in the show, the decisions that they made got them into those situations that they're in. Same thing with us, right? And this is not like, a blame situation or you need to take responsibility for your life. Not that. This is just to point out that, the series of decisions that we've made in the past have led us to where we are in our lives today. And if we're less than satisfied, if we're unhappy, with the current circumstances, understand that you're not stuck. The decisions that you made got you there, and because of that, you can make decisions that can get you out. It's as simple as that. It's really, really, really basic logic. However, again, I can understand that we feel stuck. Number one, because of all the circumstances that's going on around us, we feel like we have less options. But also, number two, making that kind of change is scary, right? It's scary to make really, especially if they're drastic changes, right? Especially if it's a major upheaval in your life, like a career change, right? Like that's the last thing you're going to want to do. But understand, nothing is going to change unless you change, unless you make the choice, unless you make the decision. Remember, at the very beginning of the show, we talked about that. Make a decision before a decision is made. And if we're just talking about career changes, I mean, there's lots of people that are being forced that decision right now, right? With the economy the way it is, with the job market the way it is, with inflation the way it is. Things aren't necessarily, don't necessarily have that stability that they used to, 20, 30 years ago. And so you're going to want to make that decision before that decision is made for you. For me, I've definitely very much kind of overhauled my own skill set so that I want to make sure I stay relevant and evolve with the marketplace, evolve with what business is what's happening with business. Because if I don't, I know that I risk going extinct. And so yeah, I'm teaching myself and learning things that I've never been exposed to in the entire 16 years of my career so far. Like I'm expanding my skill sets into new territory, new and foreign and scary territory, but I'm making that decision now before that decision is made for me. So you're not stuck, right? If you feel stuck, I understand. Like I said, I get it. It's scary to make change, and it feels like there's fewer and fewer options out there. But I want you to know that if you're feeling stuck about something, if you're unhappy with the situation, if you're unsatisfied, especially if you're in a situation that's not healthy and that's not safe for you, you have to make that decision to change. Yes, it's scary. Yes, it's frightening because it's completely foreign, but you have to change for your own good because it's not going to do you good to live out your life in circumstances that are less than ideal. I want you to live a fulfilled life. I want you to live a happy life. And the thing that's standing in your way, the only one thing that's standing in your way from that is a decision. Right? Just like the characters in the show, just like the characters in this episode. The one thing that was keeping Cassian and the rest of the inmates from freedom was the choice to break out, was the choice to alter the trajectory of their lives. And I'm not saying that one decision is going to change your life overnight. What I'm saying, though, is that one decision can start changing the trajectory so you can start living the life that you want to live as opposed to feeling stuck with a life that you don't want to live. So that's all it is. You're not stuck. You're not in a prison. You can make the choice. There is one way out, and that way is a decision. All right, well, that's going to do it for today's episode. What do you guys think? prisons of our own making, prisons of our own choice. Are we living in a prison? Are you living in a prison? Do you feel stuck with any place in your life? I'd love to have this conversation. If there's anything that you feel stuck with, part of my career, part of my role as a business person and as a network marketer is as a mentor. So if you just need somebody to talk to or chat with, please let me know. I'm happy to do that. I can definitely, at least at the very least, share my perspective with you and kind of work you through whatever thing you might feel stuck with, right? So reach out to me. Well, outside of that, let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about this episode and about Andor so far. I mean, I know the show's already finished, and I did watch the rest of the show last night. And I absolutely loved it, so I can't wait to discuss those last two episodes with you next week and the week after. But this episode, the One Way Out, it was an amazing episode, and I want to hear what you guys think. So hit me up on the socials, hit me up on Twitter. It's POTJ Podcast on Twitter. It's the same thing for Facebook as well, POTJ Podcast. You can send an email to info@pathofthejedi.com. And also, you can find me on Instagram. I know Twitter is kind of in this weird space right now. So if you want to find me on Instagram as well, I'm pretty active on that. It's Cannibal Ron. So it's at Cannibal Ron. Yeah, it's just me on there. I do more business stuff on there, and I do actually focus more on my other podcast, Path of the Network Marketer. But you can connect with me on there as well. We can chat. I love using that chat. It's much easier than some of the other platforms. Anyways, I just want to know what you think about this episode, what you think about being in prison and the different prisons that our characters are in, and any prison that you might feel like you're stuck in right now. Let me know. We want to help, right? That's what this show is for. Again, it's POTJ Podcast on Facebook and Twitter. info@pathofthejedi.com is the email, and you can hit me up on Instagram. The account is at Cannibal Ron. All right, so now it's time for this week's shout out. This week's shout out goes to an amazing organization and foundation called WWO, formerly known as Worldwide Orphans, but is now officially known as WWO. And its amazing founder, Dr. Jane Aronson. I absolutely love this organization. I've been contributing to this organization, this foundation, for years now. I found them back in 2014, maybe 2013, around that time. So the better part of a decade now. But I just really love the work they're doing. I initially found them through just randomly. Oh, actually, okay. So the story is, my sister and I saw a tabloid photo of Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone. At the time, they were still together. But Andrew Garfield, I was a big fan. Spider-Man at the time. But they were being chased around by tabloid, photographers, paparazzi, and, they were coming out of a lunch or something like that, of a diner, and they were holding signs in front of their faces, like, instead of looking at our faces, you should check out these amazing organizations. And one of those organizations just happens to be WWO, Worldwide Orphans. And I had known that I had wanted to do some kind of work and donate to, an organization that benefited children, especially orphans. And Worldwide Orphans was exactly that. It just kind of fell in our lap. Like, we weren't at the time necessarily actively looking, but it was like, okay, it's time to start donating, start contributing to this cause. And I fell in love with them. We looked into them, and we started donating immediately, and we've been contributing to the organization ever since. And one of the things about the pandemic, the difficulties is that with the pandemic and then the resulting kind of economic downturn, charitable organizations have really suffered as a result. And I get it, right? With the economy getting tighter and tighter, all our budgets are getting tighter and tighter. And so, that makes perfect sense. It's not a blame situation. However, I point this out because there are organizations that still need our help, right? Like, children will still always need our help, and the children that WWO serve are marginalized children around the world, especially orphans, right? In places that that might have seen kind of natural disasters, and they don't have support systems like that. It's a top to bottom amazing what they do. I mean, they pay attention and look at the children's needs from a health standpoint, basic fundamental needs, education, but they also do child development, right? They really focus on helping these kids grow up to be well, to develop socially and to develop healthily and have good, just like the mental health, right? Because it takes a lot, like it's a lot of trauma that a child experiences when they go through, losing parents in a natural disaster and being alone and being in foster systems or being in an orphanage. So this organization is amazing, and it is worldwide. I mean, it's Worldwide Orphans. So I wanted to kind of highlight them. It's the holidays. It's gala season. I'm not unable to go to their gala the last couple of years, but there's always a drive and there's always a need for continuing support and continuing donation. So I wanted to shine a light on them. At the very least, if you could just give them a look, check them out. It's WWO. The letters wwo.org. It's really simple, and just look at what they're doing, and if it aligns with you and your sensibilities, I would ask that you make a contribution. And here's the thing about contribution: it doesn't have to be a lot. Every little bit helps. I know you've heard that, but here's what really helps, right? Like here's what really helps: continuing contributions. We contribute every payday to the WWO. Again, it doesn't have to be a lot, but what I've asked people in the past is, if you can donate $1 a week, that's $52 a year, right? And then let's imagine if there are 1,000 people that hear this message, that's 52 times 1,000. I can't do math, but you know what I mean. If everybody just donates $1 a week, we can make a huge dent in the universe and the lives of these amazing kids through this amazing organization. So that's why I wanted to give a shout out to WWO. Again, no pressure to make a donation or anything like that, but understand that there are organizations out there that still and will always need our help. Now is the time, it's always a time, but it is a giving season. So I would encourage you to check them out. They do great work. At the very least, learn about them. And if financial contribution isn't possible, get involved some other way, right? There's lots of ways to get involved, but check them out. Again, it's WWO. And their founder, Jane Aronson, amazing organization. The website is wwo.org. I'll leave it in the show notes of this episode. But yeah, just wanted to highlight them, shine some light on them and the good work that they do. So this week, shout out goes to WWO and Dr. Jane Aronson. All right, so if you have a shout out, or if you have any individual or group that you'd like to give a shout out to and shine a light on and celebrate, right? Like, let's do that. I know I always say that. I love to celebrate. This is really my favorite part of the show. I love doing this show anyways, but like celebrating each other and shining light on each other is something that will always be needed, right? Like donations. So let me know if there's anybody that you want to celebrate. Send an email to info@pathofthejedi.com with a shout out in the subject heading. You can write out the message and I'll read it out to you. I'll read it out on the episode, and you can share that episode with the individual that you're giving a shout out to, or even better, you can record an MP3 and I'll play that in the show. I'll include that in the episode so that it's even more personalized, right? So again, I'd love to do that for you. The email is info@pathofthejedi.com. Put shout out in the subject heading. All right, well, that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you for tuning in. Andor is amazing. We've got 2 more episodes to cover, and then we're going to get into the holiday season, which is much later than it's crept up much quicker than I anticipated. I didn't really plan it out to work so well that we're going to be like through mid-December by the time we finish Andor. But anyways, whatever comes after Andor, we'll see. But stay tuned, because there's lots of exciting stuff. This show is absolutely amazing, and it gives us a lot to talk about because it's so well made. So next week we'll do Andor episode 11. Until then, be well, be safe. May the Force be with you.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company nor Lucasfilm Limited and is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names and sounds and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is intellectual property of Path of the Jedi unless otherwise indicated.